Okay, where are we? The 16th of Teves, the Hayom, short Hayom. The Tzemach Tzedek told Rab Hendel at Yechidus. Now, in this version of the Hayom, there's a little note about Rab Hendel, which I think is worth reading. Rab Hendel was a chassid who exemplified many Hasidic traits: humility, warmth of heart, compassion, fervent worship, though he did not excel in the intellectual mastery of Hasidic thought. An elder chassid, when the Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak was a child, so when the Frierdiker Rebbe was a child, this Reb Hendel was an older person, but there was a relationship between the two of them, and even the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was a child, Reb Hendel had a profound influence on the Rebbe to be, and was often cited in the Rebbe's sichos. And what did he say? Oh, okay, back. So what did the Tzemach Tzedek tell Rab Hendel at Yechidus? He told him, study of Zohar exalts the soul. Study of Midrash arouses the heart. Tillim with tears scours the vessel. Okay. Our third installment on the Benoni in Likutei Tanya, in Likutei Moharan Tanya, page Yud Zayin, about 2/3 of the way down the page, and in Lessons in Tanya, page 179. Okay, the line starts, if you're looking inside the classic edition, it starts with Mitzvah Satira. So he starts with Afal Pichein, nevertheless. Nevertheless, what? Nevertheless, even though, I'm saying now outside just to catch us up here, even though the Benoni never has a thought, and certainly therefore no speech or action that's not connected with Hashem, we don't call him a tzaddik. Eina nikra tzaddik. Now I'm back inside. We don't call him a tzaddik, klau, at all. Why not? B'nei sheyisun hazeh, which, because this advantage that is had, this that he has, ashla ola nefesh elokis, which the advantage is, remember, this is a war between the nefesh elokis and the nefesh bahamas, and in the Benoni's nefesh elokis has the advantage, like we would in a wrestling match. And this advantage that the nefesh elokis has, ala chayshek v'sichlas shel klipa, over the darkness and the foolishness of the klipa, anidcha, which is pushed away, Benoni pushes this away, mamela ena ela b'shlei shelavushi, that this is only in the three garments of the soul, not in the more essential, deeper parts of the soul, as we said above. V'lei, as he says now, v'lei b'mahusi v'atzmusa shel mahusa v'atzmusa shel haklipa, and he hasn't pushed away the essence and the very being of the klippa, of the negative forces. Because the essence, the very, what that mahus is a word you see a lot, mahus, translated as what that thing, mahu, you can break the word mahu, what it is. The very thing that klippa is, the hatzmusa and its essence, shel nefesh bahamis, of the animal soul, shemeha klippa, which is from the klippa, shebecholol hashmali, which is resident in the left side of the heart. That essence of what the klippa is, hasn't been pushed away at all from the Benoni. It's still there. Now we said there are certain certain special times from above, and certain times during the day, such as prayer, when the Benoni can reach that state where the nullification of the klippas is there for the moment, but it can come back. After the davening. After tefillah, it goes out in the street, goes to business, goes to whatever the Benoni is doing. It doesn't, that complete erasure, if you will, for the moment of the mahus of the klippa doesn't stay that way. It comes back and it enters back into, and he's not, or she is not totally given over to all the time with a love of Hashem, with a flaming fire, with a revelation of the heart in the right side of the heart. He's only got the love which is hidden. Now, this is a very powerful point. You think it's ki'im, meaning only, what he has only has, and this everybody has, is the taikef, the ratzuf ava mitzuteres. The internality of the heart is paved, like a road is paved with a hidden love. So the hidden love is there in every single Jew. This is the source of and the possibility for amach kulam tzadikim, that every person can become a tzaddik if a person learns how to touch that ava misuteres, that hidden love in the heart. And there is in our instructions and teachings in Chassidus about how to do that. But in the Benoni, that ava misuteres, even when he or she touches it, is not always the only thing in action, because the Benoni has not had the power or been given the gift to be able, through his or her avodah, to erase the presence of the nefesh el bahamis or the klippas entirely from the stage of, which is the inner dimensions of the person's heart and soul. This is an important line, because there is an ava misuteres, and there are many memorim about the ava misuteres and how to arouse the ava misuteres and how to keep one's attention on it more often than not. This ava misuteres, shehi avas hativis, which we said earlier, this is the natural love. Remember, the natural state of a Jew is to be one with Hashem. That's the nature of a Jew. The unnatural state, the state that most Jews and humans in general live in, is an unnatural state, the state of being separated or living in a life which, in thought, speech, and deed, and even in one heart, one doesn't feel that essential connection, and one doesn't live with that essential connection, but it's always there. As it says, this is worth repeating, this is the ava hativis. This is a natural love. Shebenefesh elokis, as in the godly soul. Because of lakamin, as we'll speak about later. As I then, since the Benoni isn't in contact with that ava misuteres all the time, and there is the presence of these other negative forces, the klippas, which are active in the heart, then the foolishness of the foolishness of evil, the evil kingdom, the evil prince, the fool. Hakasil is a fool. So then the foolishness of the evil fool comes his galus liba, comes revealed in the Benoni's heart, becholav hasmoli, in the left side of the heart, which is the resonance of the nefesh bahamis, l'savas taivas l'chol inyoni gashmis, to have desires and yearnings for and preoccupations with the physicality of this world, gashmis olam hazeh, ben beheter, ben be'isser, whether in a permitted way or in a forbidden way. One can lust after things which are prohibited, God forbid, and one can have lust, desire, and yearning for things which are permitted. And in that moment, or those moments, it's as if the Benoni hasn't prayed at all. Now remember, let's keep in mind, that this still is not going to reach the point where the Benoni is ever under the control of these desires which are present in the heart. Because control would mean that I'm thinking about it, I'm involved in it, and chas v'shalom, the worst, I'm doing it. That never happens in the Benoni. As that's what he said. And that's what he says. Even when it comes to speech, or I think it's b'davar, right? In other words, when it comes to anything, davar isser, anything prohibited, it never rises into the mind, literally, of the Benoni to do it. Or isser, this prohibited thing, but poil mamish, in actuality, chas v'shalom. Ela hihuri avera hakoshim Vedas, Yecholim Lifol, Oilis Lamoichai. Yehudi Avera. Now, this is an interesting expression. Yehudi is there are certain urges that do rise, urgings of Avera. Now, urgings have to, in order for them to arise and be present in your soul, there has to be some kind of mindfulness. Your mind has to be on them in some way. But we're going to distinguish here, not we, the Alter Rebbe, and it's important to distinguish the difference between Yehudi Avera, just the desires, the notion of that it just enters your mind, versus holding on to it in one's thought and then thinking about it, and then from there bringing it down to the other two garments. Yehudi Avera, these urges, these thoughts, but not thoughts that are you're going to grasp onto, but the feeling of these things does arise in the Benoni. Yehudim Avera, which Chachamim have said these are hakoshim Avera, are harder than Avera. I mean, they're harder to stop. Yehudi Avera are difficult to stop. Machshava, to actually grasp onto it and start thinking about it, and then, of course, thinking about how to satisfy it, that's easier than these Yehudi Avera. That's why the Benoni is the Benoni and not a tzaddik, because the Benoni hasn't yet reached the level of being able to totally get the urges of negativity off the playing field, off the small place of the warfare, which is the inner city that the Yetzer Hara is trying to take control of. So that's our sages have said, Avera, Yehudi Avera, Kashim Avera, that these little musings, these little risings of desire are more difficult, harder to stop. It's very difficult to prevent them from having their effect to come up into the brain. And then confuse one literally for a moment, for a second, get one a little off track. As our sages have said, Gimel Averas ein Adam Nitzel Mehem B'chol Yom. There are three sins that a person is not saved from them every day. And that one of them is Hira Avera, the one we're talking about now. Another one is Iyun Tefillah, being totally concentrated either in time, within all your time, but more normally, even when you're learning, to be totally deepened in depth into the concentration of davening. And the third one is gossip, idle talk. And that's today's Tanya. So just to sum, and then we'll turn it up over to questions, comments. The difference between a tzaddik she'ein gomer, right? He's incomplete, right? He's not complete. Never has these Yehudim Avera. A Benoni does have these Yehudim Avera, but never expands on them to bring them into conscious thought, speech, and action. Okay. Questions? Comments?
I have to get off. I have to take care of my son. He slept over at my mother's house last night. But thank you. My comment is just thank you very much, and bruchim to you.
And Mazel Tov again. Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
Okay. Yehudis, your hand is up.
Yeah. So what I'm understanding is that what the Benoni is able to get from his communing with Hashem strengthens him to be able to withstand these temptations for the rest of the day, right? He gets this intense devekus and burning love for Hashem, and that's supposed to last him. That kind of spills over to affect him the rest of the day. No,
that may happen, but that isn't what he uses that for in this chapter. He uses that burning love that he can have in davening to say, on the contrary, that burning love which he has in davening doesn't stay with him. And as a result of that it doesn't stay with him because he hasn't converted his deepest level, or he hasn't been able to arouse a capability to sustain his contact with his deepest level, which is the Ava Misoteris. So that wonderful experience that he had in davening doesn't stay with him, and it fades away as the day goes by.
So, but it has to have some kind of permanent effect on him. No, it doesn't have an effect on him that enables him to stay in that Benoni status the rest of the day.
I believe you're right. I think it does. I think there's a lot of Hasidus that talks about that. I'm just saying that what he's saying, laying on the page here, is he's using it in a different way, a contrast. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
There's no question. There's no question that there's a famous expression, Chazal, that when you take on a new behavior, like let's say concentration in davening, I'm going to decide to concentration in davening, that becomes your second nature. Hergel nasa teves shenis. That's be accustoming yourself to something that creates a second nature. So what you're saying is true. The more you're oisik b'Torah, the more you're oisik in the pirush hamilus in davening, etc. So that will have an effect, no question.
Right.
It will make it last longer. It will change the quality of your life. But unless you've somehow graduated to tzaddik, all of that doesn't stay. You can stay, by the way, in the Benoni never has a thought, speech, or action against negative, but you haven't yet converted that and turned it upside down and got it off the playing field. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Rivka is next, I think.
Sorry, I missed the first part, but I caught what you said, and I love what you said about our natural state being an actus with Hashem, and that this state of struggle and the state of gullus and everything is unnatural.
Yeah.
And so we really have to just return to ourselves. We have to be true to ourselves.
Absolutely. iPhone. Whose iPhone? Got a hand up.
I don't know. That's me, but I don't know why my name is. Okay. So anyway, so it takes an awesome amount of work, but then as it said, Rivka just said, the Benoni hasn't ever had a time when the Benoni had a bad thought or speech or action. So how is it possible this is something that takes your whole lifetime of work to be able to go from be mindful all the time, because if you're not mindful, then you're going to slip into a zone and you're not going to do those things. Or I'm not. So how did that work? And also, the Benoni is not born into be a Benoni, apparently.
Right. Correct. As they say, halavai Benoni. Would that we could become Benoni.
Right.
Let alone tzaddik. It's a lot of work. Yes.
So how does that work? That they never make a mistake, and yet they can't be born into it. So how did they not make a mistake, or how does it work to even become one?
Like anything else, you train yourself.
Right, but it can't be that you've never made a mistake your whole life and never had a bad.
Oh, you mean you're talking about that statement that the Alter Rebbe made yesterday, that the Benoni never commits a sin in his whole life.
Yeah.
That's a good question. It has to be taken very, very literally the way it's written. Of course he's done sinning in his life, on his way or her way to become a Benoni. But once the person becomes a Benoni, by definition, that person is never going to sin in his life.
Oh.
Because you can't sin if you're not putting some kind of your machshava into the action. You can have a desire, but you never bring it to conscious thought. And this is a very subtle thing. I mean, I don't know that all of us can really distinguish within ourselves the difference between something. Well, let me put it first. I'll put it the way that it's structured in terms of the powers of the soul. Shabbat Ibn Amaisa, we know our garments. Our garments are external, right? So what's deeper? Deeper are the esekleichos, the 10 powers of the soul, right? The power of vision, which is in the soul, which lodges itself in the eye to see. The power of thought, which lodges or seichel, intellect, which allows itself lodges in the brain. But there are deeper soul powers than seichel, the super rational powers of the soul, which were actually hinted at. And we brought it out yesterday in the words. And let me just look back here. The words because the question is asked if there's a war going on here between Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamis, Zeh Umazeh, they're both equal. Zeh Umazeh, God created. What hook does the Nefesh Elokis have to win the battle? The hook is the power of the Nefesh Elokis' Chokhmah, which reaches into the ayin, which is the transcendent powers. And in those transcendent levels, one finds one's essence, which is Achelak Elokam and Mamash. Now, can each of us or every one of us distinguish between the levels where the transcendent levels of our soul are being active versus the immanent? We'll call the immanent seichel, thought, and the transcendent ratzon. Every time you put your will to something that contradicts what your desires are pointing to, and you will yourself to do something else, that's an example of the notion of not allowing the thought to grab a hold of you. The Benoni lives like that all the time, always living at the level where the ratzon, the transcendent levels of the soul, are overriding the natural, let's not call them natural, the immanent levels of the soul, which is thought, speech, and action. That's a Benoni. And well, yes, it's a lot of work.
Right. So if a person, it says that the thought rises up and never comes into conscious thought, which would mean that a Benoni has control over their subconscious mind,
over their ratzon, over their will, their will. Not completely the subconscious have depths and depths and depths over the will. Here's the expression. There's the expression. That's the watchword, right? The brain rules over the heart, right? And he says that what brain is this? A little bit later, this is the aspect of the brain which is the koyach ha-chokhmah, the chokhmah shebenefesh elokis, the chokhmah, the very root of intellect of the godly soul, shebemoyach. That's what rules. Asher ratzoina, which her will. Now here you have to bring the will, which is the transcendent level. The will of the chokhmah of the godly soul is limshol, that they should rule alone, limshol levadai. And remember one phrase which you'll see a lot in Hasidus: chokhmah ma'ayin timatzai. The power of chokhmah of the godly soul comes from and is in contact with the ayin. And for general purposes, we'll call the ayin here your etzem, the essence of who you are. And if you're in contact with the essence of whom you are, then you're not going to allow the hihure avera, which have risen up in your mind. Your will say, no, I'm not even going to think about it. And I'm going to just detach myself from it. That's the act. I'm just describing the active behavior. That's the behavior of the Benoni inside himself or herself. You get it?
I mean, as much as I could right now.
Okay. Yehudis, you're back.
Yeah, so compared to the tzaddik, it seems like, I mean, I could be way off, but that the tzaddik is more able to elevate than the material world than a Benoni, because the Benoni has to kind of keep himself a little bit more distant.
Right.
Because,
yeah, the Benoni is at the level of hiskafia,
of pushing away,
and separating oneself, right?
Right.
The two levels of his. It's interesting. Is Rabbi Ginsburg has a book on psychology and Torah. I don't know. That's not exactly the title. And he brings. I brought this before. The Baal Shem Tov originates these three levels: Hachna, subjugation of the Yetzer Hara; Havdalah, separation from the Yetzer Hara; and then Hamtakah, sweetening, right? And in the footnote in this book, Rabbi Ginsburg says that in the Tanya, these two levels of Hachna and Havdalah are all called one, Hachna. The Alter Rebbe doesn't distinguish between Hachno and Havdalah, but the two things are the same in Tanya, subjugation and separation. The Benoni is able to subjugate, of course, right? He pushes it away with two hands. He pushes it away, subjugate. And he or she separates from it. Never allows that Yehudi Avera to touch the deeper levels of himself or herself. And then the Tzaddik, now the Tzaddik also is in levels 2 and 3, right? Which is the levels of complete separation. And then the third level, Hamtaka, the Tzaddik She'ena Gomer, the Tzaddik who's not complete, completely separates himself or herself from it, but in a degree of difference, which is that the Yehudi Avera never ever enter into that person's consciousness at all. That's a tzaddik. It's still present, it's on the playing field, but it's never ever making its presence known even in the slightest, not even Yehudi Avera. And then he goes on from there to the tzaddik Gomer, which is Hamtaka. So the Benoni is in that category of dealing with Hachnoah, subjugation, and separation, but the separation isn't uprooting it from his essence, it's separating itself it from ever entering into his conscious thought. And Halavai Benoni, meaning everyone can become a Benoni. And then we've learned earlier, not everyone can become a tzaddik. Although we all have to constantly, on the flip side, remember, Amach Kulam Tzaddikim, we all have this Ava Misuteris within us. And it's not only possible, it's part of what avoidance of Hashem, that Alpi Hasidus demands of a Jew, which is to contact and live, at least from some moments, in contact with the essential nature of who we are, which is the Nefesh Elokis, the Chelik Elokam Imal. Rivka, your hand is up again.
Thank you. Yeah. Don't we also learn that when we turn, or we do the work, we turn to the right side, we turn to do the right thing, Hashem helps us, we get extra koyach to go in that direction.
Hashem Israel. It's a blessing. Yeah, Hashem helps us. Absolutely.
So that it's not,
this
is so hard. This is so hard. How can I do it? I can't do it. But you're not alone. Well, you're not doing it because you're going on the easier path. You're going on the path that Hashem wants you to go.
Right. It's just you have to grab that thought and make sure it makes it easier for sure, but it makes it easier to know that. But you still have to do the avoidance. Yeah. Hashem does help us. Because we are Chelik Elokam Imal, that's the edge that the Nefesh Elokis has over the Nefesh Bahamis. The Ratzon Elyon, the supernal will, our will, essentially in contact with the I and the essence, the transcendent levels, which are ultimately part of God Himself. Ubechein. So what? Before we get to the Chayenu, I mean, one thing I think I have to say is that it's, as we are having this discussion, know that it's within our reach to be abated. In other words, that it is within our reach to control whether the desires which we're going to have, which are maybe for things which are not Kedusha, we have the ability, with God's help, to push them away, separate ourselves from it, know that our essential self is not that, and with that knowledge, create a feeling in our heart that what we are is much deeper than that and in a different realm, and therefore to habitualize ourselves into at least acting that way. Rivka,
yeah? Let's see, take
away.
I'm more or less echoing what you're saying, but I was going to say that it's not as hard as we think it is, and it becomes easier. And just try it. Try it by small steps. Try it by small steps and see what happens.
I think, and back to Eliza's comment, it is hard work. Keep in mind, Hergel Nasa Tevashemi. Just like in everything else, the more you accustom yourself to learn how to, your fingers should move in a piano scale, the more natural it becomes, right? And the less thought you have to put into it. The more you accustom yourself to behaving this way and capturing the moments when your thought, and you are in control of your thought and putting them somewhere else, the easier it becomes. Okay? I think, till we meet again. Okay. Good day, good night, wherever you are. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.